The France-Vietnam War, often overshadowed by its more infamous successor, the Vietnam War, holds a significant place in the annals of history. This often forgotten conflict, which raged from 1946 to 1954, was a complex and multifaceted struggle that had far-reaching consequences for both France and Vietnam. In this video, we will delve into the causes, key events, and outcome of the France-Vietnam War, shedding light on its significance in shaping the trajectory of these two nations. To understand the France-Vietnam War, it is essential to consider the historical context in which it occurred. Vietnam, a former French colony, had a long history of resistance against foreign rule. French colonization began in the mid-19th century and lasted for nearly a century. During this time, Vietnam underwent significant social, cultural, and political changes as it was subjected to French influence and control. By the early 20th century, nationalist sentiments were growing in Vietnam. Intellectuals and political leaders, such as Ho Chi Minh, emerged, advocating for independence and self-determination. World War II disrupted French rule in Vietnam as Japan occupied the country. After Japan's defeat in 1945, the Vietnamese sought to capitalize on the power vacuum and declare their independence. Nationalism and independence. The foremost cause of the France-Vietnam War was the Vietnamese desire for independence. The struggle for self-determination and the rejection of foreign colonial rule were powerful motivating factors. Led by Ho Chi Minh, the Viet Minh, a communist-led nationalist movement, played a pivotal role in the fight for independence. French imperialism. France, on the other hand, was determined to reassert control over its former colony. The French government viewed Indochina, comprising Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, as an integral part of its empire and was unwilling to let go of its colonial possessions. Cold War dynamics. The Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union added another layer of complexity to the conflict. The United States supported France in its efforts to suppress communist movements in Indochina, fearing the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. Key events of the France-Vietnam War. The First Indochina War, 1946 to 1954. The France-Vietnam War is often referred to as the First Indochina War. It began in 1946 when French forces attempted to regain control of Vietnam. The conflict was marked by brutal battles, guerrilla warfare, and shifting alliances. The Battle of Dien, 1954. This iconic battle was a turning point in the war. The Viet Minh, under General Vo Nguyen Giap, laid siege to the French stronghold of Dien Bien Phu. After a protracted and bloody struggle, the French were defeated, leading to the Geneva Accords. The outcome and consequences. The Geneva Accords, 1954. The war came to an end with the Geneva Accords, which divided Vietnam along the 17th parallel. The North, under communist control, was led by Ho Chi Minh, while the South was supported by the United States and France. These divisions set the stage for the Vietnam War, which would erupt in the 1960s. Legacy of the France-Vietnam War. The conflict had profound consequences for both France and Vietnam. For France, it marked the end of its colonial empire in Southeast Asia and exposed the limitations of its post-World War II power. For Vietnam, it laid the groundwork for reunification and the eventual success of the communist forces in the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War. The France-Vietnam War's legacy extended into the Vietnam War, where the United States became embroiled in a protracted conflict against communist forces in South Vietnam. The events and lessons of the earlier war influenced the strategies and decisions made during this later, more infamous conflict. The France-Vietnam War, a forgotten conflict in the shadow of the Vietnam War. played a pivotal role in the history of both France and Vietnam. It was a complex struggle rooted in nationalism, imperialism, and the dynamics of the Cold War. The outcome of this war, marked by the Geneva Accords and the division of Vietnam, set the stage for the subsequent Vietnam War and had far-reaching consequences for all parties involved. Understanding this often overlooked chapter of history is crucial for comprehending the broader context of the Vietnam War and the modern history of Southeast Asia.